Okay, you're trying to picture your next CEO, and you have two different candidates. I want you to picture when that CEO is retiring in 7 years, and they're giving their farewell speech. CEO number one says, "You know what? Here's what we've accomplished over the last 7 years." Coincidentally, the time period matches when they were there. Okay, and they brag about what they've done, and yada yada yada. Okay. CEO number two says, "We are positioned for the future. We've got a wonderful future ahead of us, and here is why." So one is crossing a finish line, the other is handing off a baton.
Welcome to the Product Quest podcast. Thanks for joining us on our journey to better understand innovation and product strategy. My name is Scott Burleson, and joining me as always, my co-hosts Jan Vermouth and Jonathan Edwards. Today we welcome our very special guest, Dan Adams. Dan is the founder and president of the AIM Institute and author of New Product Blueprinting, the Handbook for B2B Organic Growth. He's a chemical engineer by training and the holder of many patents, including a listing in the National Inventors Hall of Fame. He has also recently published another book, Business Builders, which will be our topic for today. Dan Adams, welcome to the Product Quest podcast.
Great to be here, Scott, Jan, and Jonathan.
And Dan, as anyone who visits the AIM Institute will know, certainly I do, you're a very prolific writer. And I thought we'd start by, since we're going to talk about your new book, but did you enjoy writing growing up, or was that something that just sort of evolved with your career as you grew up?
I didn't really enjoy writing. Maybe they were all assignments when I was young. And, as I got old, but I always liked to read, Scott. In fact, I don't want to brag, but even though I'm 68, I read at the 70-year-old level. So I've always enjoyed reading. And I think when I got a chance to start writing on topics that I had a lot of passion for, that's when the writing part took off.
Yeah, it's like in one of those earlier books that I'm assuming was your first book was on parenting. So how has your approach to writing changed since that first book?
I think the thing that's common is it was something I just had to get out. I had some things I wanted to say about parenting, and then we went into blueprinting and now business builders. But I think the thing that's changed is I had to rely on other people's research originally. I mean, in every case, I had a deeply held conviction. But I had to rely on other people's research to kind of support that. More recently, in the past few years, and working, of course, with you at the AIM Institute, we've had the luxury of doing our own research. And I think in some ways that's more balanced, because when when you're trying to defend your position, you do a little cherry picking, a little bit of confirmation bias, right? And so, hey, here's something that supports me, right? But when you do your own research, you get a little bit more nuanced, balanced view of things. And so I think I feel better about some of the more recent writings I've done for that reason.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, you're certainly anybody since your training knows you are an excellent communicator. And interesting things like when you're delivering training or even reading your emails or reading your writing, I can hear you talking. I can hear you talking as I read. And I think that's a fantastic trait. I mean, it feels very accessible. I feel like you're like one-on-one and you're talking, we're having a conversation, which I think that's, we've all seen academic writing where we feel like the author is sort of trying to talk over us or not really trying to communicate, but yours consistently, I feel like we're just having a conversation. I think that's a great mark as a writer.
I think, the thing that maybe helps me is I try to think about the person reading. What is it that they need to hear? Somebody gave me an illustration a long time ago. I'd kind of forgotten about this, but they said, picture a bullseye. What do they need to know in the center? And then, what would be, helpful to know, what's nice to know. And I think sometimes when you mention academics, I think about this. They may be writing a 700-page book because they're trying to defend their position going on and on. But I saw some research that said after people graduate from high school, 58% of Americans never complete reading a book again. So I think a short, crisp book, white paper, those things, you really need to hit the target and have a voice where it's, like you say, it's conversational.
Yeah. I don't know if it's true or not, but I can tell this whether it is or not. is that, a lot of the academic writing, I think the only people who read it are maybe like their professor and maybe their mom. I don't know. I think that's probably that's probably not.
I can vouch for that. That's true. That's 100% true.
Oh, sorry. Jan finished. Jan's an exception.
No, you're 100% right.
All right. Well, let's think about your most recent book. And so you wrote a book on becoming an admired corporate leader. What was the catalyst? What was the initial thinking behind that inspired you to take that on as a topic?
It really built over really a couple of decades. I spent 29 years working inside of corporations, and I saw all kinds of leaders. I saw some who were builders, some who were climbers, just trying to look good, manage up. And I don't even know when I started using the term business builder, but I think it was when I was working for this really good Dutchman in my last few years in the corporation. And, it just seemed like it was natural for him, but it's all about market-facing innovation, building capabilities and skills, delivering value to customers. And it was just an absolute joy. In fact, New Product Blueprinting came about in that protected environment. He let me do what I wanted to do. And so I think that's where it started. And then the company got sold. And I won't talk too much about the specifics, but when I saw the new leaders, I remember thinking to myself, they couldn't carry his briefcase. So I went to them and said, I tried to find out where they wanted to go. And I was right about where they wanted to go. And so basically, I asked them to fire me if they would, please. I didn't want to quit because they had these great severance packages back then. So I couldn't say I quit, but I could say, I actually asked the new guy, I said, tell me what you want to do, who you want to keep around. He described, I go, yeah, I'm not that person. So you might want to think about this a little bit in your next cutback. So a few months later, they fired me. And then I started the AIM Institute.
Please don't throw me in the briar patch. Please don't throw me in the briar patch. But I think with any time in corporate America, we see these situations. One that I reflect on a lot is my first, your first professional job. I think elements of it stick with you. And mine was with Converse, and there were 2,000 employees there at this factory in Lumberton, which was a very poor economic area. And for those 2,000 people, that their livelihoods, their children, just the quality of life for a whole town was a small town was dependent on the decisions that this 2 or 3 people were making, and they were not making good decisions. And, something about that. I really think it's a noble mission you've taken on. It's like, and in that case, I got to watch that. I was sort of like you. I saw where things were going, and I was not going to be the last rat on the ship. So I jumped before it went under, but it did go under. And there were a lot of people that didn't have, some of the options that I had. And
when these executives, when they make a decision, they're not throwing a pebble in the lake with little ripples. They're throwing boulders with waves coming. It impacts so many people. And, so kind of building on your question, the motivation, why did I still want to do this? It's been like 19 years since I left the corporate world. Well, what I see is when we are training people at these usually large B2B companies, some of them just take off and run with it and have enormous success. Others, it kind of fizzles out. And the thing I've noticed is it always comes down to one thing: it's leadership. If that leader or the C-level is being driven by builder behavior, they're going to keep at this thing. They're in it for the long term. They're going to build their company. If it's just a passing fad, they'll go off onto something else and they'll worry about this quarter's earnings again. So I think it was a measure of frustration. And, what I've noticed when people try to make a change, as they get older, they get crotchety. I'll give one example. So Dr. Deming, I had the joy of actually sitting and listening to him for a week in a conference when he was like in his 90s. And this is back in the 1980s. And he had been telling American management what to do with quality control. They didn't listen. So he went over to Japan and found this little company called Toyota. And he was just having a blast poking at American management for a week. So he got crotchety in a very entertaining fashion. And I can name some other people who try to make changes, but they're still living, so I won't give their names, And so I thought, okay, I have a choice, Dan. I could get crotchety and frustrated by this behavior, or I could write a book. So I'm not ruling out the ability to turn crotchety later, but I thought, well, let's start with the book and see if we can influence some people.
I'm not holding out on seeing crotchety Dan. I cannot imagine. That's beyond my imagination. So I don't think we're going to see that. But but I think the point is you felt. Tell me if I understand this correctly. I mean, you really felt almost a calling to tell this story of how important it was, and as you say, it infects so many people.
Yeah.
Well, what's interesting, Scott, I'm not like the most self-aware person on the planet, but, I kind of tried to understand why so much I wanted to do this. And, when people look at the AIM Institute, they say, oh, you're in the business of helping companies grow. We are. That's great. But if you ask me, go a little deeper. What is it you're really trying to accomplish? Is it for the customers? Is it for the shareholders? Is it this? It's the employees. That's the part that really motivates me, because what we've seen is when you have a company led by builders, it's market-facing innovation, they're growing. What happens? Well, the employees aren't worried about the next layoff. They're not looking over their shoulders all the time, and they're having rewarding, engaging jobs. There's nothing better than going to work, feeling you're part of something that's creating wonderful things for the marketplace. So that's really the motivation, is to make life a lot better for employees. I think there's a good chance in 20 or 30 years, we'll look back and say, what were we doing? We weren't valuing employees and engaging them the way we should have. We were paying way too much attention to Wall Street investors, who are, by the way, holding our stock for an average of less than 6 months before their share handlers. Why were we working so hard for them when we had these potentially faithful, loyal employees, which is what used to be the case before the 1970s, right? Yeah. Employees were loyal. So maybe we'll look back and say we went through, half a century of oddity and weirdness and got back on track. I don't know.
It reminds me of, just so much has changed in the last 50, 60 years over just a employee's relationship with their company, where it used to be somebody would stay there for years and years, and there really was a two-way loyalty at one time. And then I think I believe that loyalty was first sort of cut short on the employer end, and over time employees became less loyal. I won't call out the name of the company, but there's a private business I'm aware of. It's over $1 billion. It's still still in the family that started it, and the person that's the CEO of the company is getting close to 80, and they've always done some they've really rewarded that loyalty. Like when somebody retires, they're often given cars. I mean, they get a truck, a brand new vehicle when they've been there like 40 years, So
yeah, sure.
They could have worked anywhere in the business, and they're celebrated, and they really celebrate it. It's just such a throwback. And this person I know that runs the company, and again, is getting close to 80. He's self-aware enough to know that he's not going to be able to do this another 50 years. And one of his greatest fears is that, after he's not there to lead it, that it's going to be a private equity situation and sold off. And all these people that have, grown their families under his leadership are going to, that things will be changed dramatically. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Well, he has a heart for the employees. I mean, I think that's really important. When you have a builder in place, they're really thinking very, very hard about their customers, how they can keep delivering innovation, not get down the commodity death cycle, and then how they can engage their employees together to help them do that. And that's when really good things happen at a company. It doesn't happen overnight, though. It takes time, and it's that lever of time that gets us in trouble. When we're always about the short term, we just can't do the stuff that's long term.
Yeah. Jan, did you have a question?
Yeah, and I just wanted to kind of react or bounce off something you said, which I think you really made me think about this. I think growth is still kind of a word that's important, and the financial growth as such is really important. But but I feel like you were alluding to a different kind also of growth, like a really more of a developing things or the building that you're alluding to, and you're 100% right. Now that you mention it, it can be it's a hugely inspiring thing. Like we can debate growth and all kinds of things, and all it is debated as a term, but I honestly, it's true that being on a growth path is hugely inspiring, and it's something you can be proud of if you have achieved it. And I'm not just talking about like financial growth, like that's nice, right? So I mean, nobody says no to money usually, but like, but I don't think that's not where the inspiration, the pride then comes from. Like having achieved something that's strong. That can be super strong.
Yeah, it's a wonderful point you're making. You know, in our research, we asked, are your senior leaders, how are they doing in the balance between near-term results and long-term capabilities? You guys may remember Stephen Covey talked about P&PC, production and production capabilities. You know, the golden goose and the egg, right? And the goose and the egg. And so what we found was in low-performing companies who are not growing well, who are not doing well, there was a really, really heavy overemphasis on near-term results. The companies who are doing better, it was much, much more about building capabilities. And that's the growth part. We're growing as employees, we're learning, we're developing new skills. Now, here's the thing that's kind of mind-boggling. If you went to any human endeavor and asked, do you need to build capabilities before you get results? You would say, of course. Pole vaulting, chess, rock climbing, golf, you name it. Can you think of any human endeavor where you don't build the capabilities and grow those before you go and compete for the prize? And the answer is, I can't think of any except, well, maybe American business, right? In American business, we just keep going after that quarterly earnings over and over again, and we don't really invest in growing those capabilities. So yeah, that's what builders do. And most of the capabilities that a builder builds are human-based capabilities. These are skills, these are culture related, they're attitudes. It's really in the people themselves. And if you're firing them and letting them go every couple of years, then good luck with that, right?
Yeah. So with the book, Dan, who was the audience you had in mind, and what would you like for them to take away, or how would you like them to be changed as a result of reading it?
Well, you know, I in the book, I actually do talk a little bit about, are you, an individual contributor? Here's what you can do, some tips for you there. Are you middle manager? Here are some tips for you there. And are you at the C-level suite or the senior level suite? Now, you know, in Dan's perfect world, here's what the ultimate audience would be. It'd be the board of directors. And that board of directors would say, wait a minute, where are we going? You know, first of all, are we all in agreement? We want to grow this company over the long term and build the strongest, healthiest company we can. Great, we're in agreement with that. Now, the second thing is, why then are we putting people in senior leadership positions, rewarding them heavily while they're degrading our ability to do what we're trying to do? Because these short-term actions that are being taken are precise. Think about travel bans, cost controls, you know, firing people, layoffs, and all these things. You know, these are precisely the things you would do to put your brakes on the long-term growth. So that's what I'd like to see, is a different direction. We talk about this in the book also. You know, if you were running a 10,000 meter race, 25 laps, 400 meters, okay? And your goal was to win the race, and you had somebody in the spectator stands who places a side bet on your time for lap number 17. Would you run all out and sprint lap 17, exhaust yourself and lose the race because you wanted that side bet to go well for that spectator? Well, if the answer is no, then why in heaven's name are we doing everything for the quarterly earnings for these share handlers who are holding the stock for less than 6 months? They don't give a hoot about our company and the long-term health, but that's your job as a board of directors and as senior leaders to care very, very much about the long-term health, winning the 10,000 meter race.
Yeah, the funny thing that comes to mind, I've thought of this over the years, the number of companies that have really focused on building a great company and have publicly said we don't care about our stock price is very small, but their names are like Amazon and Apple. Right? These are like Jeff Bezos was famous for saying I don't care, and was sort of mocked as whatever, and then it worked out well for him. So
it worked out pretty well. 7 years he went. 7 years before he turned a profit. Yeah.
So, yeah, exactly. Years. Yeah. Because why? Because he was focused on this vision, this building this thing, and was literally, at least so he was public in saying he did not care about the stock price. It seems like that would be a story that others would immediately copy. But what do you think has prevented them from copying these very few number of examples?
Well, so the thing that Jeff Bezos was able to do very effectively, he was able to create a picture of where the business is going. So think about this for a moment. If your company has a PE ratio of 20 to 1, okay, that means that the company's value is 20 times what it did this year in terms of earnings, right? Well, wait a minute, where's the other 19, right? What's that? How do we get to 20, right? Well, that's what the investors think the future of your company looks like. It's about the future of your company. So Bezos was able to create a picture of a future that's very, very exciting. So he was able to find plenty of investors that came along with him and had huge stock market valuations way before he ever turned a profit. So now let's come back to your question. What this means is the business leaders, the senior leaders, they need to have that vision and they need to communicate that vision. If all they're doing is the short-term stuff, they're sending signals that they don't have that vision. In fact, if you have long-term, if you guys are all long-term investors, would you want your leadership of the company you've invested in to be doing travel bans and cost freezes and hiring freezes and layoffs, putting the brakes on your long-term growth? You would not. So you attract more of the wrong types of investors with this behavior. Warren Buffett said, companies attract and deserve that the investor constituency that they have. So yeah, they need to get the story. They figure out what their story is and then communicate it more effectively.
Funny, I'm having a flashback. I remember giving a presentation a little over 10 years ago, and I had this Amazon example in there, and I remember this. This is why I can't remember anything. I've got all this useless information in my head, but I remember what Amazon's PE ratio was. It was 75, and that was about 10 years ago. And so somebody would say, what a terrible investment. How can that be worth a 75 PE ratio? But it's, Amazon from 2010 to 2013, I'm going to say without even looking, that probably would have been a good investment. Despite its 75 P ratio back in 2010 or whatever.
Absolutely.
I know within business builders, you've got certain categories, decorator and so on. Would you mind sort of taking us through those different types?
Yeah. So we did this research and got a very high response rate on our survey. And we didn't ask employees, are you a builder, decorator, remodeler, or realtor? Because we didn't think a lot of people would sign up as I'm a decorator, right? Instead, what we did was we defined each of these. And basically, a builder is somebody who drives strong organic growth by meeting the needs of the marketplace. A remodeler does good work. They're all about productivity improvement and quality improvement, making things better. We need those people. However, if all you do is remodeling and never building, eventually you descend down into the commodity cycle and you're competing on price. And then the next one was the decorator. And the decorator is all about presenting favorable picture of performance and future to investors. And then the realtor is somebody who's mostly engaged in buying and selling, acquisitions, which again can be very helpful. But if you don't know how to grow what you've acquired, you're building a house of cards. So we make it clear in the book that we're not saying you shouldn't look good to investors. You shouldn't, improve your productivity, and quality. You shouldn't do good M&A. Those are really good things to do. What we're saying is, if those are the main thing you're driving in your business, you will not be as successful as a builder-led business overall. So we did this research, and we had people, we were able to parse the data, senior level leaders responding, middle management responding, and subordinates responding. And what we found, or individual contributors responding. And what we found was, for the most part, the middle management and the individual contributors agreed very closely. So for a lot of the research in the book that we reported, we just grouped them together as subordinates. So you got really two groups, senior leaders and subordinates. And so what we found was about 50, I think it's 52 or 53%, about half of the senior leaders self-identified as a builder. And when we ask subordinates it's all about your senior leaders. We aren't asking, what about you? We're asking, what about your senior leaders in these research questions? About 32, roughly a third of the subordinates felt their leaders were builders. So somewhere between a third and a half are probably builders out there, and the others are chasing something else. So that's basically the foundation. Now, we also ask questions about, what are your feelings about your prospects for future growth of your company? And we also ask questions about, how do you feel you are growing versus your competition, the same, slower, or faster? And so a lot of the most interesting research, I think, was when we were able to compare slower growth companies to faster growth companies. And what we saw over and over again was the builder behavior was more associated with the faster growth companies, and the decorator and frankly even the others, remodeler and realtor, were associated, again, in terms of the leadership, the main passion. In fact, that's something we were clear about. What is your main passion? And so that was associated with slower growth, those others, non-builder. So, it was kind of fun to see, because that's kind of what I thought. But it's good to get data.
A couple of things. So a third to half was builders. Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, third to one half. Basically, the senior leaders thought, half of them thought they were builders, themselves were builders, and the subordinates thought a third of their senior leaders were builders.
Yeah, that makes sense. So to your point earlier about the audience you really hope finds these board of directors, I think this would be a very compelling case for the, board of directors, which probably more than anybody else, perhaps, have the most logical and rational, longest term thinking, or at least should have that perspective. And so,
if only the subordinates read it, then nothing changes. I'll have been successful in frustrating a lot of subordinates with,
for sure.
So
go ahead, John.
Is it possible to become a builder, or are builders born that way? Can someone who reads your book and say, "Oh, I think I might be a decorator," then change and become a builder?
So that is the $64,000 question, Jonathan. I don't know the answer. I say in the book, if you're a decorator, but you're a senior leader, but you can change. You're a leader. You can do this, right? I do also believe that a lot of people will find it very hard to change. I think when we look back, if this book is successful, we'll probably find that what it did more than anything else was allow people who are builders at heart to justify their actions, to explain why they're doing what they're doing. That's probably the most likely outcome of this. I would be just delighted if some decorators became builders. I do think there's a very good prospect that remodelers will, in fact, some of those will become builders, because remodelers have the right heart. They want to make things better. It's just that they're directing their actions at things that won't, in the long term, get the job done. But they're very important to do now. We can't stop, doing that kind of remodeling work. So I think we might be successful in taking a lot of remodelers and saying, yeah, that's great what you did. Keep going it. But here is your new North Star. It needs to be building for the future by delivering value to your marketplace. So we'll see.
Yeah. I think
And I actually would have a follow-up question, which is it always the case that a builder is better than the other personality or characters?
In the answer is no. Now, if the question is in the senior leadership or leadership of a business, because we could be talking about a division here and the general manager, not the C-level, right? So any business leadership we could talk about. What we can say from the data is when you have a business builder leading that business will do better. Does that business builder leading the business also need on his or her team people who can make us look good to Wall Street? Yes. People who can drive productivity and quality? Yes. People who can pursue acquisitions? Yes. So the fact is, not everybody is nor should be a builder. We need these other behaviors, but we need them more in supporting roles, not the main leadership role, according to the data. So, so there is a thing, an assessment we have, and we tell people, don't feel bad if you're not a business builder, but you might want to get in a company that is led by a business builder so you don't have to worry about the next layoff. And you might enjoy yourself a lot more supporting that kind of dynamic, high energy, market-facing innovation.
I imagine a lot of the remodelers, came out of the 80s era of lean manufacturing and good things, Six Sigma and lean, and let's reduce inventories, and hey, let's keep, measure our, take longer to pay our suppliers, do all these things, make our cash look better. But I don't remember who I heard say this, but I heard someone say you can't shrink your way to greatness.
No, you really can't.
Nice.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you, to have some hope for the remodelers, because it could just be an awareness thing of where they've been, or maybe it could be like their first roles were operations, and that was their charge, and so that's what they should be doing. But they literally might not be aware that there's the limit to how far that can do for the good of the company.
I like your perspective on time also, Scott. We've written a little bit on the waves, the quality wave, the productivity wave, the innovation wave. And, in the 70s and 80s and even into the 90s, the quality wave was what you really need to focus on. I mean, if you weren't doing statistical process control and, you were Chrysler with, cars that were not high quality, and you were facing Toyota with cars that were, you just needed to focus on the quality wave, period. I mean, you had to get there. And then you get into the productivity wave and lean and business process reengineering and all these sort of things. And you know what? You needed to do that. You need to get there. Now we're in the innovation wave. And, if you haven't figured out the quality and productivity by now, you're probably not even in business anymore, right? Those are more prices of entry, table stakes, that sort of thing. You need to keep working it, right? But the point is, what do you do if you get to zero defects? What do you do next? If your productivity is so high, you're running a lights out factory. What do you do next, right? You do reach a point of diminishing returns. When you talk about market-facing innovation, as opposed to the other two, there is no limit. As long as you can understand and meet customer needs better than others, there's absolutely no ceiling to what you can do. So yes, if somebody grew up in that quality and productivity wave, you can understand that. So it may be an awareness. Guys and gals, we're in a different era right now.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there was an era when being a remodeler could be a source of competitive advantage. It's 70s, 80s. That era probably ended somewhere, I'm going to say, in the late 90s, something like that, where like you say, there's a table stake. So that, and if you're not doing cellular manufacturing, if you haven't taken all that waste out, you're already out. So So, but because it at one time historically was a source of competitive advantage, you can see how that idea would be hard to let go of.
Exactly. So I think there's a lot of hope for remodelers. This is something I wrestle with a little bit, and I'm still wrestling with it. If somebody is not a builder, it could be because their natural passion just isn't that.
Right.
They're just good at making things better. They're
Right.
great at telling a story to Wall
Right.
Street. Go for it. Do it.
Right.
Be the best you can. There could be others, though, who aren't a builder because, they grew up learning that the goal was to maximize shareholder wealth, and they haven't really seen the evidence that that's a bad idea.
Right.
Or they don't realize we're a little bit past the productivity and quality wave and they need to change. So some of it's natural, who you are. Some of it is what you're aware of and your ability to learn and adapt to the times.
The realtor is an interesting one too. I think, again, anybody that's been in corporate America for multiple decades, you've known some realtors, right? Or you've probably worked for some realtors. So they're, M&A, they're always, every presentation, there's a target they've got, it's always a very secretive thing, they can't talk about it or have to be measured for legal reasons, what they could say. But what do you get the sense that first we would offer an opinion. But of course we want your opinion, but my sense is a lot of times the realtors, they just enjoy being realtors. Like they enjoy that process of they like visiting companies and it seems to me, I guess I'll just get your reaction from my thoughts on it, is that they just enjoy it. They enjoy visiting companies and having the high level meetings but the question you wonder about is, there's lots of evidence, at least I haven't read it recently, but I know historically there's been a lot of evidence that this does not increase the long-term prospects for a company. So I'm always like, are they aware of that? Are they not aware of that? What are your thoughts?
Well, the numbers are all over the map, but most of the research, and there's dozens of studies that support this, most of the research says that somewhere between 70 and 90% of them will not be successful. Yeah. They really won't help. So you have to ask, why are we doing this? And I agree, there are some people who love it and they're very good at it too. Yeah. And we need them in some cases. So I think there was a period of time where people were doing acquisitions to mask their lack of organic growth. And so, they were able to, the reporting systems weren't that good 20, 30 years ago. So you're able to go out to investors and say, hey, we grew this much. And they would go, well, how much is organic? You'd wave your arms a little bit. And it was kind of cloudy, So that was seen as a way of growing because you didn't know how to grow, right? But then I think now when people are doing acquisitions, there needs to be a good question of what will this acquisition do? And if it's growing for growing's sake, or it's more about the synergies and the cost reductions and all that sort of thing, those are the ones that are not successful. But there are some that are very, very successful when they bring strategic capabilities that our company needs in order to be successful in the target markets we're focusing on. So those can be really, really good. And that's where you need those people who enjoy it a lot, who are good at it a lot. But again, supporting roles. If your leadership team is all about, this is what we're doing, we're just going to grow by acquiring, they're going to make a lot of dumb acquisitions and they'll be in the 70 to 90% range quite a bit of the time.
And I think as folks read the book and learn about builders, remodelers, decorators, and realtors, I think that's a great point, that the realtor skills are highly valued and needed, and the decorator skills are highly valued and needed. Certainly, we've established remodeler skills; they're necessary for staying in business. So it's not that those are bad. It's just, if I understand it correctly, we still need a builder at the top, and maybe these others would be supporting. Yeah.
I wondered if we could dig in a bit more into what a builder looks like, because when we talk about builders, what I have in mind is, someone with tools, building a chair, or maybe a programmer or an engineer or something like this. How does this translate for the C-suite? What does a builder in the C-suite look like? Is this about creating an organization? How do you see this?
Great, wonderful. So let's go back to, as I mentioned, at the AIM Institute, we work, predominantly with some very large companies. So let's think of any of those companies. You guys could imagine some publicly traded companies are very large. And let's go ask, what did the founder behave like? What was that founder like? Well, that's the builder behavior we'd like to emulate. And what did that founder do? The founder found a need in a marketplace with customers, and they did an amazing job of meeting those needs. And they just kept doing it. You know, one of the companies that we highlight in the book is Parker Hannifin and Tom Williams, who recently retired as their CEO. He's still chairman right now. And he likes to talk. I love this. He likes to encourage Parker employees to be refounders, to think. He says, your last name does not have to be Parker to be a refounder. He wants everybody thinking like that. So to your question, Jonathan, you can be a builder at any level of the company. You can be somebody who, just wants to understand customer needs, meet those needs. You might be, it could be really easy for you if you're in product development area like R&D and that sort of thing, but you could be in sales, you could be in marketing, that could be a great role, product management. You could be on teams as an entry-level employee that are doing market-facing innovation. You could be out there interviewing customers with your teammates, learning about customer needs, be on that team, help them develop the product, launch it. You could be in finance or accounting as supporting this. Okay, you don't have to be an engineer or a chemist to do this. So that's what a builder looks like at the entry level. Then as the builder moves up through the organization, they're hiring other builders. Again, not everybody, but they're hiring market leaders and technology leaders who have the same passion for delivering value to the customers, just like the founders did. They're not the climber. The climber is just managing up, trying to look good all the time, They're all about building something for the future. They know that by creating these value propositions, these differentiated new products, that they're building the business. It's not a temporal thing. They're putting out new product platforms. Their business is getting stronger and stronger. And then when that division general manager or whatever gets promoted to the C-suite, they do what they've always been doing at the rest of the company. They say, you know what we did and how we got here? We're going to keep doing that. And so that's what a builder looks like. Now, a decorator, or let's even call it a climber, how do they succeed? A climber is somebody who's good at reporting results, while a builder is good at creating results, okay? The time horizon of a builder is years. The time horizon of a climber is quarters or months. If financial reports were reported on a fortnightly basis, it would be fortnightly, okay? So when a climber gets to the top of an organization, they've run out of steam because they climbed by looking at businesses who are already led by builders and extracting value, right? They let people go, they cut costs and so forth because it doesn't hurt them in the short term. But heaven help them when they get to the top of the organization and there's nothing left to cut because that's what they know how to do. So that's the difference between a builder and some of these other mentalities. Does that help, Jonathan?
It does. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I want to emphasize this. So maybe this is kind of the wrong room to emphasize it, but still I want to do it for those outside the room, is that you connect building with customer needs, right? Yeah. So what you could initially think is you could say, well, builder is about, it's like focus on the product, but there is this, I think the emphasis on business building and how you connect this to building it on customer needs or an unmet need. I really want to stretch this and how this seems to go together, like a long-term growth mindset, whatever you want to call this, that obviously something like a builder seems to have, goes hand in hand with customer needs and being about them and not about whatever kind of short-term thing you can change or the product you can tweak, but it's how can I make this a long-term thing? And customer needs seem to play a key role. And I would naturally agree, but I think that needs stretching. It's just
it does. And this is why it's difficult for people because it is complex. Peter Drucker said the purpose of business is to create and keep customers. He also said there's only two functions of business, marketing and innovation. All the rest are costs. And so we can make a strong argument that the primary directive is to create value for our customers. But the builder knows there's a lot that has to happen for that to take place. They may need to move into new regions of the world. They may need to acquire new technology capabilities. They may need to build a lot of skills within their organization. They may need to think about the culture of innovation that's taking place. They may need new processes to manage their innovation. That's why it gets so complex. So if you take that simplistic example of the founder, they could focus on vulcanizing rubber or whatever it was they did to get started, right? And that was pretty simple. They're meeting the needs of customers. And some might argue, yeah, well, when you get bigger, you really don't need that founder anymore. You just need all this other stuff. The fact is, you still need that builder mentality. You just have to surround it with lots of other supporting capabilities. But if you lose that first love, well, a lot of those companies aren't around anymore.
I also noted that you made that connection between builders and understanding customer needs. But in my mind, often this is exactly kind of the conflict, that you'll have an engineer who's maybe a really good builder, but builds for no one, or doesn't really although this of course is changing and not a generality, but I think there is this cliche of the, someone who just is going to build something without considering the customer needs. So how are these not builders, or how would we, is it correct that you connect needs and this builder personality?
They're probably enthusiastic but misdirected builders. So if they like to create things, that's great. Give me that for the starting point every day. Scott and I are in the business of working with misdirected builders, aren't we, Scott? Sure. And you know what? They do great once. In fact, the fact is, those misdirected builders who start with their own ideas, their own solutions, they actually get frustrated because nobody loves their baby after the baby, is born. And so once we teach them how to go about understanding market needs, then they're great at it. Maybe they were thinking it was marketing's job or product management's job, and they're waiting for somebody to tell them what the market wants, and we can teach them how, no, you can do this, hopefully get your marketing buddies to come along with you. And when they do great. So yeah, you're right. I mean, think of a builder building a cathedral. You need lots of other people, right? Stained glass artisans and scaffold erectors. You need lots of other people building that. But you also better have a pretty darn good plan for what that cathedral is going to look like at the end. And so the only people who know what that plan is for new products are the people who are going to buy those new products. So heaven help us, we better go talk to those people and figure it out.
And so some pretty important stakeholders also in building cathedrals, right?
Absolutely. You need a team on this thing. That's why I wasn't discouraged writing this book. I included this in one of the chapters. If it is true that some of the best builders at the senior level grew up with market-facing innovation, this is something they learned, they loved, they developed passion and so forth. But the thing that gives me hope is they cannot do that on their own. They need a team, and this team has lots of other skills in selling, in finance, in operations. And so what I find is those people love being on a team that's really going to be successful. And the only way they're successful is by giving customers what they really want.
Yeah. I really like this idea of, I believe you said Tom Williams, this idea of adopting this founder mentality. We
founders, yeah.
I think that's fantastic advice, because one of my thoughts was about an audience of this that I hope finds this book would be young folks just beginning their careers who this is probably this is something they probably aren't naturally thinking about a lot early on, but I think it would be a great mentality for those, because the future leaders are they're young now, right? So I'm hoping
Well,
those folks find this book, and I love that idea of that founder mentality for them.
well,
But I would say that there is. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead, Jonathan.
I was just going to say, I think this depends often a lot on the culture in the company, because if you're going to adopt a founder mentality, then there also needs to be a certain allowance for failure, and because in the end that's part of it, right? I mean, if you're trying new things and you're trying to develop new ideas, some of them are not going to work. So
it's a great point. One of the other leaders we feature in the book is a gentleman named Kees Verhaar, and he was the fellow I worked for that was this amazing Dutch business builder. And he said, when I interviewed him, he said, I would let people know when I made a mistake, because I wanted to make it really clear that it's fine to make mistakes as long as we learn from them. So it's a culture where risk is tolerated and accepted, and people are encouraged to learn from those and keep building. I'm going to come back to Scott's point, though, on the young people. Imagine you've got somebody who's really bright, and they could go to Wharton and pursue finance, because people in finance make a lot of money, right? Or they could go to, MIT and pursue, a background in a technical area and so forth. I would hope that people would pause a little bit on the finance side and think that through. It is true that you make a lot of money in finance. I hope it changes. I'm not saying I hope they, get, cuts in pay, but what I'm saying is there's some research. There's a book out called Makers and Takers, a fascinating book. And the makers are the ones who are building the business. The takers are the finance people. And the author, she makes the point that it used to be that finance worked for business, and that's no longer the case. Now business works for finance. And we've got it backwards. We need to get that back to where it was. Finance is an important function, but we shouldn't all be working for finance. We should be really building strong businesses. So I would encourage people who are just getting into the workforce to think about the skills, the education, the background to become a builder. What's it take to do something great?
The illustration that comes to mind is Disney. Disney was originally founder-led. And I know that Walt Disney himself, he bet the whole company on the success of Snow White, like mortgage to the hilt, bet the whole company on Snow White. And then he bet the whole company again on Disneyland. He spent everything. If Snow White's not successful, if Disneyland is not successful, he bet the whole company twice. And then he passed away in the 60s. And then in the decades since, it's been not the same. Most recently, what made me think of it is the realtor, because as we're recording this is 2023. In the last 10 years, I just saw an article where their stock is the same price now it was 10 years ago, Disney. Meanwhile, they've purchased Star Wars, LucasArts, they've purchased Marvel. So they've made all these, and before then they bought ABC. Even before that, they bought ESPN. They bought these massive properties, and in 10 years, their stock price is the same. So that's a pretty good case study for what happens when you're builder-led versus realtor-led.
I think this idea of going all in on different projects, this is a theme that comes back time and time again in what I would identify as builder-led companies. I mean, I was just listening to an interview with Jensen Huang, who's the founder of NVIDIA, which is a lot in the news right now because it's doing very well, of course. And in this interview, he was talking about exactly this: how they bet everything on a certain project. And if we take, well, the cliche one, Elon Musk, he does the same thing. I mean, he's bet he put all his money on various projects at different times. So I wonder if that's a characteristic that
I think it is. I think that's part of it. And I think the ability to make major changes in strategy. I once saw a letter from Thomas Jefferson written to the owners of DuPont saying, you've got some really good explosives. They really helped me blow up my tree stumps on my farm, you know? So here's a company that's transformed itself over and over and over again. And I'm sure some of those were very big bets. Corning, a lot of people don't know this. It went through 7 near-death experiences. For a while, they were really big. Just before the internet bubble burst, they were all about, the cable, the fiber cable. And when that crashed, they almost died. That's happened 7 times. But in every case, they were able to redirect. And so I think there's an awareness of where the market's going, the future, and an ability to change is probably a really important part of this.
I want to move us to the website, areyouabusinessbuilder.com, where folks can take an assessment. Dan, can you tell us a little bit about that website and this assessment they might take there?
Yeah, it only takes people about 5 minutes. It's a free site, areyouabusinessbuilder.com. And they answer 20 questions. Now, here's the part that is important. We mentioned it, but it could be glossed over. We ask them to either strongly agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree on 20 business builder, and here's the key word, beliefs. So we're saying, do you believe this, And so we get into, shareholder wealth and market-facing innovation and lots of different aspects. And in fairness, these are Dan's observations, 20 observations about what I have seen market business builder. I'm not saying they're right. These are just I figured since I get to make up the term business builder, I get to make up what the definition is. Okay. So at any rate, people fill this in. And when they do, they can then download a 5 or 6 page report, and it gives them a score 0 to 100. And the closer you are to 100, the more your beliefs align with my vision of what a business builder is. Okay. And so, I've just started getting this out to some friends. So we have like nearly 100 data points so far. And most of them are, in the 8100, but that's what's called sample bias, right? So it's out to my friends and that. But I do recommend when you get a score that's not real high, well, okay, if you get a score that's high, first of all, you've answered the question, this is what you believe. Now, the second question that you have to answer on your own is this how you behave? Yeah. Because somebody might be a builder in an organization, maybe a subordinate role, and they may have very, very strong beliefs and score 90 on this thing, but they may go, but I can't do this because I'm working for a bunch of decorators, right? And so I give some recommendations if that's the case, one of which is find another company to work for, but that I won't get into details on that. Okay. So the first question is, if you score high as a builder on your beliefs, is that what the behavior is? If you're a senior level, is it time to change? Is it time to act on your convictions? Okay. Now, what if you score lower on this? That's where I say, well, there's a couple of things that you may want to think about. You may not be aware of some things. You may still have heard that maximizing shareholder wealth is a good idea, and that's not a good idea, and here's why. So in the report they download, we have for all 20 of those, 2 or 3 references to the book that they can go and explore in more detail. And if we've changed their thinking from an awareness standpoint, we would then invite them to go and take the business builder assessment again and see if their numbers have changed. And a few people have done that. Now, somebody might take it once or twice and go, no, I'm just not a business builder. And we say, that's great. We need you in these supporting roles. We need you making us look good on Wall Street. We need you making our quality better, our productivity better, and so forth. And so my recommendation there is, if you can, find a business builder-led business and be part of that and build something great with them. So by no means are we saying everybody should be a builder or that's the right answer, but it probably isn't bad to examine ourselves and ask, what do I really believe? And can I learn a little bit more? And now what do I believe? And then go from there.
I think that's fantastic perspective on which category somebody ends up in. I mean, if they're a decorator, then maybe that's even helpful career advice. They should seek a role where they can specialize in it. At the same time, they need an awareness of, this is not the path to success for the whole company. So they could
Yes.
sort of embrace what they enjoy doing with realizing that they probably should not be at the very top. Like you need a builder. They need to be working for a builder, which is,
Well,
very,
that's
Being
tough.
head of
That's
investor
tough
relations.
to tell someone that, though. I mean, it's to
Really?
get that info. I don't know. I think. Do you think people would be happy to say, "Oh, okay, I guess I'm not made for the top. I'll just be content."
I think there's a builder talking, so that's probably why you're. I think many would say I'm fine with having a good boss. Depends a little bit. Like
Maybe.
I don't know.
Well, it's a great question. I don't know the answer to it. We do have data now that so here's the question. If I'm a decorator and I'm at the C-suite and I'm all about the quarterly, earnings and presenting a good face, that's what I've been doing. It's how I got here. Okay. Now, if I'm faced with data that says that isn't really the best thing for my company's overall growth, how will I react? I don't know the answer to that. There's going to be some of them. I mean, it's only natural. Your ego's pretty big by the time you get there. I'm going to go with what got me here. I'm successful. There will be even a subset. I hate to be cynical, but they'll go, I don't care. I got mine. I'm getting out. I mean, I'll relay a quick story here. At one company, very large, multi-billion-dollar company, the chief technology officer was talking to a bunch of group presidents. And one of the group presidents said, "Yeah, I don't believe in innovation." Now imagine that, right? You're the chief technology officer. Well, what do you mean, Joe? Rover guy goes, "What do you mean you don't believe in innovation?" He goes, "Well, I'm retiring in 2 years, and anything we do now in terms of innovation is not going to help me." Now, this fellow had somehow lost sight of the fact that his role was to leave his company stronger than he found. By the way, that's a mantra we have throughout the book. If you're a leader, your number one objective beyond everything else is to leave your company stronger than you found it. This guy was not thinking about it. He had turned this whole objective into what can I get out of it? What bounty can I receive, stock bonuses and so forth, and go home with, Now, we need to find those people in our organization. We need to get them out of there because those people are driving out the builders, the would-be future builder leaders in our company. I don't know how many people are like that. I'm not naturally cynical, so yes, there are some, but I would hope that most of them just didn't fully appreciate that decorating is not what their company needs. So we'll see.
Yeah,
There's a name for those kinds of people is jerks, no?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, what I have an illustration in the book for the board of directors. Okay, you're trying to picture your next CEO, and you have two different candidates. Okay, I tell them, I want you to picture when that CEO is retiring in 7 years. And they're giving their farewell speech. Okay. CEO number one says, "You know what? Here's what we've accomplished over the last 7 years." Coincidentally, the time period matches when they were there. Okay. And they brag about what they've done, yada, yada, yada. Okay. CEO number two says, "We are positioned for the future. We've got a wonderful future ahead of us, and here is why." So one is crossing a finish line, the other is handing off a baton. So I'm encouraging, boards of directors to think about the one who's going to pass the baton on. And I tell them, imagine you had the founder of your company sitting in the room with you, deciding between CEO number one and CEO number two. Which one are you going to pick? That founder wants to keep building it bigger and bigger and better, stronger, and so forth. So yeah, that's what I hope will happen with the book.
It certainly seems like one attribute of a builder is they think about other people. I mean, if a person's logic is, well, if the earnings per share hits this 5% whatever number, then I get $500,000 bonus, and that's sort of the beginning and end of my logic. There's probably not much that's going to appeal to them, but I find myself reflecting on this other CEO of this private company I mentioned is, getting up in years, and his biggest concern is what's going to happen to these thousands of people when I'm not here? Will this company, go to private equity? What will happen to them? That, I mean, obviously it's not a problem for him, but what will happen to these other people? So that really there's an unselfishness in the builder.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's a personality or attribute. Yeah.
Humans are really, really good about picking up on self-interest or other interest.
Yeah.
And so in that organization, I'd be willing to wager that the vast majority of the employees understand that this is a special leader that they're working for. They
Yeah.
probably figured that out a long time ago. And I would also
Yeah.
venture to say the people in that example I gave of the group president, they figured him out too.
Right. I think you're right. I was thinking of something similar. You're talking about the climbers. We've all seen them. They're just they move up through the organization. We sort of wonder how, but they exist. But back to the site, areyouabusinessbuilder.com. So I think it would be a fantastic thing for folks to spread that website throughout their companies. There's for folks at almost any level to take that assessment and to be introspective and just think about it. I mean, there's probably some that it could be an awareness thing, and maybe they've got that builder gene in them and they find it inspiring. There's maybe some that are, I'm a natural realtor and I'm gonna embrace that role and just sort of understand that limitations. And and then those that we can't reach, we can't reach them anyway. So I can only see positive things coming from lots of folks taking that assessment. areyouabusinessbuilder.com.
Yeah, you asked about the target audience before. So I'm hopeful that a lot of people who are not at the senior levels will take that assessment, spread it around, maybe slide the book under their decorator boss's door, or whatever it might be,
right.
I mean, if we can't change the unrepentant decorator and climber, let's at least make them feel a little bad about it, right? And but I do think there's an opportunity here to start a new discussion with a new language. So I was being very intentional when I put these labels on. When you guys have all noticed this, you're in a company and a new person heads up the division, the group, the company, whatever. Immediately, everybody says, what kind of a person is that? And if you have a passion for market-facing innovation, and maybe the person came up through operations and that's not quite where they're at, maybe the person came up through sales and it's not quite where they're at. And so we know, all of us who've been in that situation, we got a little more work to do if they're not there already, right? And so now we have a language. And so hopefully, companies will seek out the builders in those senior levels. And maybe it'll be just a little less comfortable to be a decorator and a climber.
I like that. Dan, anything else about business builders we haven't covered that we should address?
No, although I will tell you, I just got off a call with our publicist, and I'll tell you, I am still very much in the learning mode on this thing. I feel like I've kind of pointed my finger at the problems, and I hopefully provide enough data to say these really are serious problems. And I have some suggestions in the book of how to personally become more of a builder, chart your course, and how your organization can change. But I'm not at all to the point where I figured we've got it all figured out. And so I'm actually going to be probably looking to meet with some senior level teams of some different companies, maybe do what we call discovery interviews, Scott, to find out what are the obstacles that you see? How can we learn from each other? Maybe there's going to be almost a community of people who want to become builders. So I don't have that all mapped out in my brain at all, but I think there's more to this. If the book kind of catches a little bit, I think we can start maybe sharing with each other how to drive more builder-led companies. And that I don't think has been completely figured out. There's more to be learned here on this.
Well, it's just really a noble effort, quite honestly, because I mean, again, if you really think about, I think I forgot your metaphor about dropping a pebble, but the thousands of people that are impacted by a company's decisions by a very few number of people. And then, well, if that's thousands of employees, well, then that's who knows how many thousands of people, children, spouses, whatever, that are dependent on these people to make good decisions. So, it really, I mean, it's a fantastic topic, and you're certainly a builder, sir. And I appreciate you writing it and for spending some time with us today.
Well, you guys are building something here. You're building a community of people who are kindred spirits. And I really appreciate the chance to be here. So thank you for that.
You bet.
Thanks for taking the time. Yeah.
All right. Well, folks, you can connect with Dan Adams on LinkedIn. You can find him at the AIM Institute, which is aiminstitute.com. Make sure and take that business builder assessment tool at ruabusinessbuilder.com. And of course, find Dan's book, Business Builders, available on Amazon right now. Well, folks, that concludes today's Product Quest podcast. Please send any comments or ideas for future shows to productquestpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me. You guys have a great rest of the day, okay?
You too.
All right.
All right. Bye-bye
Bye,
now.
Dan.